It's actually really hard to make and market a game. In some cases, games that a ton of people put their blood, sweat, and tears into do not get the audience that they deserve or want. Sometimes really great games just aren't commercially successful. Hi folks, it's Falcon. Join the 1% Club below to get the unhinged stuff on the Falcon Show every weekend. Today on gameranx, 20 flop games that you should actually play. Starting off with number 20, it's Quantum Break, the often forgotten about Remedy game that got a lot of hype and positivity from Microsoft, who published it, but after that it completely fell off the company's radar. You'd assume that the game sold well, considering that pre-orders apparently exceeded Xbox's expectations, and it was the best-selling original property released by Xbox since the launch of the Xbox One, and has only since been surpassed by Sea of Thieves. That all sounds very good, but it's likely that the game still underperformed. According to Scuttlebutt, at the time the game actually sold worse than the Order 1886, and only managed around 200,000 copies initially. I think the most obvious indicator that the game was considered a failure by Microsoft is that they never made a sequel, despite the game laying on some pretty serious sequel hooks at the end. Clearly, Remedy wanted to do more, but Microsoft owns the IP, and according to them, the series is done, which is a shame, because Quantum Break, while flawed, is still a Remedy game at heart. The story is engaging, it's weird as hell in the right ways, and the combat is satisfying and fun. Their attempt at turning this thing into a multimedia project with an attached TV show you watched alongside the game was, I think, bizarre and limited the appeal ultimately. Having to stop the game and watch a 30-minute live-action cutscene between chapters was a chore, and it didn't feel all that connected to the actual game parts. But the actual game part of this thing really holds up, as well as it kind of seeded the entire Remedy extended universe with an extended Alan Wake 2 teaser, among other things. It's a game that can be acquired pretty cheaply these days. If you're invested in games like Control and Alan Wake 2, you should definitely go back to this one. It's both a pretty good game and manages to have deep connections to the entire Remedy extended universe, despite being an IP that they cannot officially use. It's weird, but if you play it and then play particularly Alan Wake 2, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And number 19 is Star Wars Squadrons. Despite being only a few years old, seems like everybody's forgotten about this one. The game actually had alright sales. By October 2020, it had sold around 1.1 million units, which is nothing to sneeze at, but it's an EA-published Star Wars game, and that's not actually a lot for that. Which is a shame, because there's a lot about this game that's very worthy of praise. For one, it's a complete package with multiplayer and a full campaign mode. It doesn't have any live service junk that you would expect in an EA game, and all the unlocks were cosmetic. There's no battle passes. They didn't even charge full price for the game. The default price was $40, so everything about this game seemed to go against the usual EA ethos of milking the player for everything they're worth. The game's good, too.
There, you're clear.
Nice one.
It's the closest thing we've got to a spiritual successor to the classic X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. This game even lets you adjust power to ship systems, just like in those old games. It's just a ton of fun. The multiplayer was a little thin, and the campaign doesn't give you a lot of reason to come back after it's done, but it's still one of the best modern Star Wars games and almost entirely forgotten about.
Goodbye, Teresa.
And number 18 is Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. Ninja Theory are perpetual gaming underdogs, despite their occasional highs and lows. I gotta respect them for their unique vision, especially early on when they were making games like Heavenly Sword and this particularly strange piece of work. Combining killer robots, the post-apocalypse, the journey to the West, and the final crucial component of Gollum himself, Andy Serkis.
What's your ride?
It's the only way I know how to cover 300 miles. 2 wheels and an engine.
Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, is a difficult game to describe. It's kind of like a more action-oriented Ico, where you play as the steward of a more vulnerable character that you have to defend, but the whole thing is set in a crazy, strange world of odd characters and bizarre machines, and everything wants you dead. Game's a mix of puzzling, platforming, and occasional combat scenarios, split up by big set-piece moments, so in a lot of ways, it is your average AAA adventure game from the PS3, Xbox 360 era, but there's enough unique elements that make it stand out from the crowd. Just look at it. It's something special just looking at the overall design of the game. That it's actually good and fun to play is the icing on the cake. And number 17 is Cryostasis, Sleep of Reason, developed by Action Forms, a Ukrainian studio, mostly known for making dumb crap like the now infamous Vivisector Beast Within. Cryostasis is an anomaly of a game, not just because it's actually a good game from this developer, but because actually playing it in 2026 is like boxing with ghosts. It's a Windows exclusive that's been delisted absolutely everywhere. Getting it through official channels is practically impossible, and even getting the game running, it's a challenge. So actually playing this thing isn't going to be the easiest thing ever, but believe me, it's worth hunting down if you're into oppressive Eastern European horror, and who isn't, right? Back in 2008, when the original released, the game got middling reviews from the gaming press, and must have sold pretty poorly too, considering it was the last real game from the developers, who essentially shut down in 2011. They're not officially disbanded, but dormant. Not that I expect them to suddenly wake up and start making games again anytime soon. So Cryostasis, it's a horror game that's not actually that scary, but what it does have is atmosphere for days. The entire game is set in this nuclear icebreaker that's been trapped in the North Pole for decades, and the way the game depicts cold is still impressive to this day. In order to survive, you have to find heat sources which both restore your health and act as checkpoints. There is combat, but it's relatively simple, and it's not particularly difficult. You're more likely to die from the cold than from the enemies. What makes it noteworthy is the presentation of the story, which is just shockingly well told, given the game's origins in the Eastern Bloc. Nothing against the Eastern Bloc, but often you don't get legible translations for games, and voice acting from whatever staff member can speak somewhat passable English is usually, that's usually what you got, right? But this game's voice work and writing are all really, really not only good, but well localized, I guess is probably the way to put it. It's lacking in a variety of locals, and it moves at a sometimes pretty glacial pace, but the story really carries this one. It's one of the most unique and fascinating games of the 2000s. And number 16 is Singularity. This one's pretty cut and dry. It was a flop. Got generally positive reviews, but Activision considered it a failure. The game got about 400K sold by August 2010. Nothing to sneeze at, but it's a major Activision game, so they're comparing it against Call of Duty and whatever else Activision was doing back then. So it fell short. Activision barely paid any attention to it, despite it being developed by the legendary Raven Software. Once it failed to match their expectations, they were banished to the Call of Duty mines, which sucks because they were the creators of Heretic and Hexen, Soldier of Fortune, Star Wars Jedi Knight, just a bunch of fantastic games. All because this one technically failed, despite it was honestly a pretty good game. Didn't get the marketing attention that deserved, though. It's kind of a BioShock crossed with Call of Duty situation, which sounds kind of bad, but I think it works pretty well, actually. It's an FPS set on this mysterious Soviet base. You end up going back in time and completely changing the future, and the game progresses from there as you battle alternate universe Soviet forces and time anomaly monsters. There's moments of exploration and some light puzzle solving, but the real star of the show is the shooting. From the time manipulation powers you have access to and some of the stranger weapons in your arsenal, it's a fast-paced, relatively short game that's worth playing if you have the opportunity. It's been delisted on PC, but a box copy isn't that difficult to come by. And number 15 is Midnight Suns. Despite being developed by strategy gaming legends Firaxis and directed by Jake Solomon himself, the guy who personally revived XCOM, Midnight Suns was a failure. Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick said so himself. The game underperformed in sales, and while they continued to support the creators so they could put together DLC, it was pretty obvious that past the first couple of weeks, the game was pretty much dead in the water. Like, it was not going to be some out-of-nowhere hit. The game has a lot working against it right from the start. A lot of Firaxis fans wanted XCOM 3, and Marvel fans wanted an action game, not a turn-based card game.
Well, here. And ominous green lights.
Yes, but not while you fail to use the front door.
And a lot of strategy game fans don't want either of those things. On top of that, the game launched in 2022 when Marvel fatigue was, I think, kind of at its height. People were really sick of the properties, and card-based gameplay, well, people don't know what to make of it, honestly. Anyone who's actually played it, though, knows the game is absolutely excellent, though. It is super different from XCOM, don't get me wrong. That takes some getting used to, but the quick combat encounters are cleverly done, and the deck building aspect of the gameplay is a massive amount of fun. It's intuitive, and it is addictive in a good way, obviously. The writing may turn some people off. It's aggressively quippy and fierce and obnoxious. It's got that Marvel humor everybody makes fun of the movies for, and it is a little worse here.
Hey, pal, I don't think you understand. Things are changing. 2 + 2 no longer equals 4. Up is sometimes down, and strange here is actually starting to make sense.
If you got a low tolerance for annoying characters, it's probably going to get difficult, but it's worth a shot because it's on sale and it's a really good game. And number 14 is Puppeteer. It's a 2013 flop from Sony's dearly departed Japan studio that launched exclusively on PS3 less than a month before PS4 launched. It was extremely late in the release cycle for the console, and it wasn't called Last of Us, so people weren't going to buy a game on the PS3 despite the next-gen console coming out so soon. There were not a lot of people looking for something new on the PS3 in late 2013. Oh yeah, you want to know about another game that was released September 10th, 2013, or at least that same week. It was a little game called Grand Theft Auto 5. Obviously, there's not much crossover here in terms of audience, but it did mean Puppeteer launched to near universal silence. It was barely advertising. I mean, if you did advertise it, you'd be throwing those ads into a black hole. So Sony just dumped it, let it die. Is it a lost gem? Is it the Astrobot of the early 2010s? Not really. It's a relatively light and basic platformer, but the presentations were really good.
Of all the Moonbear King's nightmarish magical creations, Weavers were some of the nastiest.
It's more of an audio-visual experience with some gameplay attached than a real game. There are more gamey parts, but if you're playing this thing, you're playing it for the immaculate art design and creative level design. Those are the parts where the game really excels. This is the kind of game we just need more of on the PlayStation. These unusual, creative games that don't really fit a perfect niche, but hopefully get enough attention to become profitable. That never happened for this game, but it's not like PlayStation helped in any way. They essentially sent this game out to die, and that's exactly what happened. And number 13 is Sunset Overdrive. Despite the disastrous Xbox presentation at E3 2013 that revealed the Xbox One, the actual lineup of games they managed to cobble together for the launch of the console was pretty solid. One of the more surprising launch games was one developed by Insomniac, who were primarily known for their PlayStation games up to this point. It'd taken one minor detour with the EA-published Fuse, but that game is better left forgotten. It was a flop that you absolutely should not play. In a lot of ways, Sunset Overdrive feels like a transition point between the studio's work on the Marvel Spider-Man games and their previous work on the Ratchet & Clank series. It combines mechanically dense open-world environment stuff with a variety of absurd weapons. It's really fun. It's a polished game. It might be tempting to dismiss it because it does look lame, and honestly, the humor and presentation does ride that fine line between acceptable and Borderlands 3. But all told, I don't think it's the worst humor we've seen in a game like this, and it helps that Insomniac isn't always trying to make things funny, and there are a few legit laughs in there, even if a lot of parts that are trying to be funny aren't all that funny.
That's for telling you I look like an ugly mad demon.
The actual gameplay is excellent, though. It's one of my favorite open world games with the way they combine Jet Set Radio-inspired movement, where you're sliding and grinding all over with a huge arsenal of weapons. Mission objectives are creative and varied. Character customization is great. The city is a highly detailed amusement park that's just tons of fun to explore. It's a straight-up entertaining game. Maybe a little too weird to sell to the Xbox audience at the time. Maybe Microsoft just failed to promote it properly, but the game was a flop, and Insomniac moved on to the Spider-Man games, and I don't think we'll ever get something like this again from the studio, which is actually kind of a shame. It's a little annoying at times, but I miss games that embrace this sort of anarchic chaos. It's refreshing to go back to in 2026. And number 12 is Evil West. This 2022 action game takes inspiration from the God of War reboot games and Devil May Cry, among other things, but it doesn't quite neatly slot in any one of those styles of games. It's kind of its own thing. It was mostly ignored back when it came out, and the reviews were a bit middling, but I think this game really deserves a second look. I think the biggest problem with it is that it takes a little while before it gets going. The opening hour or so, it's a little slow and basic, and the game introduces the mechanics in a pretty gradual way. Once you actually get access to your full arsenal of weapons, you can really cut loose though, and that's when the potential of the game is realized. For some reason, Weird West games were all the rage for a little while. This game's story doesn't bring anything new to the table on that front, but the combo-heavy continuation of third-person melee and shooting makes it a pretty damn fun action game. It's hard to fully articulate what makes it feel so different from other action games. Part of it is the lightning abilities that let you teleport around, and the other part of it is the various guns you can use in conjunction with your close range attacks. It's a really peculiar combo that works really well. It's really fun once you start getting the hang of it, and while it takes too long for the game to get you to that point, sometimes it's a game that deserves more attention as long as you have the patience to get through the kind of slow opening segments. And number 11 is Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. They tried to release a horror game on GameCube. Of course, it didn't make any money. Why would it make any money there? Eternal Darkness gets endless praise these days. I'm sure you know all about it. It's far from obscure in gaming enthusiast circles, but when it launched in 2002, it was way more obscure. The game apparently sold less than 500,000 copies worldwide. In Canada, barely sold 20,000. Was not a breakout success back in the day. Despite almost universally positive reception from the gaming press. So the game was good, but nobody bought it, probably because it's got a really strange central hook. Horror fans love the idea of a sanity meter that messes with your head as it starts getting low, like pulling tricks, like making you think your console's malfunctioning, your TV's not working, alongside the more obvious in-game kind of sanity effects. But something like that might be kind of a turn-off to a more casual audience. It sounds like a stressful mechanic, because it kind of is, but in general, the game was actually pretty easy. What actually makes it memorable is the unique way it tells its story and the overall atmosphere, which remains excellent, despite how outdated the early 3D graphics are. The way the game splits its story between multiple characters and locations and time periods, it just adds a sense of mystery to it, and it allows for some surprises regarding certain characters' fates. It's an ambitious game that mostly pulled off what it was trying to accomplish, just not sales-wise. And number 10 is The Order 1886. I'm not going to come here and tell you that the third-person shooting in Order 1886 is really anything but perfunctory. The story is flat, it doesn't go anywhere, it builds up to a big sequel hook that will never get resolved, and the characters don't give you much to care about, so why recommend it? Well, because it's from 2015 and it looks like this. This is a PS4 launch game. Well, it was planned on being a PS4 launch game. It got pushed back multiple times, and it looks as good, if not better, than a lot of modern games. And while the story isn't anything special, the actual world building is interesting. The design of the world has these meticulously detailed and refined things to it. It's a beautiful game with a really mediocre package, a quintessential launch game that didn't actually come out the year the PS4 launched, and that's probably what hurt it the most. If it had actually come out in 2013 or 14, maybe would have gotten a lot more slack, probably would have sold better too, and maybe we would have gotten a sequel. And trust me, the potential is there for a really good game, and the sequel might have been what realized it. But, well, Sony never made any official statements about the game's performance, but it obviously couldn't have been great considering they never even tried to make a game of similar quality and ambition ever again. The developers were acquired by Meta in 2020 before getting closed in 2024. Not an all-time great game, but it should be played only to think about what could have been. It's a game that a growing subset of PlayStation faithful are pretty nostalgic about too, because while the game wasn't amazing, it was definitely worth playing. It deserved a sequel, but it never got one, and that's what stings about it. And number 9 is Immortals of Aveum, published by EA. This game goes to show that it's not just live service games that get massively inflated budgets for an unproven studio's debut game. This thing was developed for an eye-watering $125 million, with EA allegedly kicking in around $40 million more for marketing and distribution. All that for a game that, according to an anonymous developer, and I quote, "No one bought it."
What are they doing out here?
Considering that the studio was closed pretty shortly after, I would say safe to assume that it's right. And yet, despite the lack of audience interest, it's not really a bad game. It's not great. It's not a revelation, but it's certainly interesting and has a lot more going for it than you might initially assume. The core concept of a magic-based FPS is unique, and how it works actually gets pretty fun, especially later in the game when you're fighting more challenging enemies that actually force you to engage all of the systems a little bit. The presentation is also pretty damn amazing. They really went nuts with every Unreal Engine bell and whistle they could, so getting this game to run at an acceptable frame rate on PC might be a little difficult if you don't have a beast of a machine. If you do, it can be a wonder to behold, though. The hardest thing is getting past the writing, though, which it's pretty bad. But you play video games, right? Like, having a terrible story, it can't be that big of an impediment at this point. Like, a lot of good games have terrible stories. And number 8 is Zack and Wiki Quest for Barbaros Treasure. This Wii exclusive puzzle game is correctly loved by people who have actually played it, but sales in 2007 were abysmal, and that's coming right out of Capcom's Senior Director of Communications. By November, the game sold less than 35,000 units in the United States, and it did not get much better after that. It was a highly rated flop at a time when Capcom was really struggling to put out some big hits. I would guess that you probably figured it out, but the game was a little weird for the average consumer. For one, the first thing I thought of when looking at the title was not the game itself, but rather the movie Zack and Miri Make a Porno, which unfortunately came out a year later and I think completely poisoned the name of this game. But you know, whatever. It's about as traditional of a game as it can get, though. They took inspiration from classic old school point and click adventures and adapted them to the Wii, so instead of a mouse, you use motion controls to move the cursor. It's good. It's a vibrant game, tons of creative, intuitively designed puzzles, and it really should have found more of an audience, but for a variety of reasons, the game was a huge flop. Look back at any list of games for the Wii, and this will be the top of a lot of them. It's a little obscure, but it is an excellent game that any puzzle fan will enjoy. And number 7 is Oddworld Stranger's Wrath. What was Oddworld inhabitants smoking when they came up with this? I don't know. Usually, shifting to first-person shooting means the developer is trying to go mainstream, but that could have been the goal here, but the results were definitely the opposite. Stranger's Wrath was way too weird for the Halo crowd and too different from the studio's previous output for the Oddworld inhabitants crowd. Their most popular games on the PS1 were cinematic platformers with a heavy emphasis on puzzle solving, and this was a highly conventional FPS where you used bugs and critters as ammo and worked as a bounty hunter. Most of the ammo types are unconventional. They don't map onto a standard weapon, and the game is more about capturing enemies than outright killing them. Pretty much everything about this game is aggressively unconventional, so it's impressive just how well they managed to pull it off on their first attempt. Where Munch's Odyssey was awkward, at best, a lot of the time, Stranger's Wrath felt snappy and confidently designed. Once you get past the initial confusion, it's a game that feels really good to play. It's one of the most unusual but high-quality shooters out there, and it needs to be experienced and appreciated by more people. And number 6 is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. You got your Prince of Persia in my Metroidvania. You spilled it, combined the things. It should have been a match made in heaven, but as with so many good things in this twisted industry, it was a flop in sales. It only sold around 300,000 copies around launch, which is far below the publisher's initial internal estimates, despite the game barely getting any promotion at a time when suspicion around any Ubisoft game was at an all-time high. Between that and the fact it could just slip through the cracks, maybe Metroidvania people balked at the Prince because they were used to indie prices. I mean, Ubisoft did try to charge $50 for it. That was probably a big problem. Very few people bought it, though, despite it being one of the best Prince of Persia games in a very long time, possibly ever. The platforming was excellent. The new time mechanics are clever and intelligently implemented, and the combat was intense and challenging. It's a great game, and if it had sold more, we would have gotten a sequel, and it didn't, so the Prince of Persia series has just gone back into the vault. Don't begrudge the game's failure, though. At least we got something, and it was actually freaking great. It's rare enough that a franchise gets a revival like this, even rarer that it's not absolutely terrible.
Try me.
And number 5 is Blob 2. Nobody talks about these games anymore, but Blob 1 was on the Nintendo Wii, and it was actually a massive hit for publisher THQ. They got in early and managed to take advantage of the early wave of hype for the system, but the mechanically much improved sequel did not. The game sold very badly. It got nowhere near the sales of the first game, despite launching on multiple platforms. In the US, it only sold around 75,000 copies, while the Wii exclusive original sold around 10 times that. It's unfortunate because the sequel is the better game. It's more varied, it's more interesting, it's much more satisfying in terms of its platforming gameplay. The soundtrack for the first game is the one real standout element to it, and it's just as good, if not better, in the second. It's just an excellent platformer that's been almost entirely forgotten about. You never see anybody bring this game up anymore, positively or negatively. Number 4 is Freedom Planet 2. Well, the original Freedom Planet dropped back in 2014. It made quite a big splash as far as indie games go, but it was mostly inspired by Sonic, and back then that wasn't a bad thing at all. Sonic Mania was still 3 years away, so fans were still hungry for anything resembling classic Sonic gameplay, and that game was a pretty major success. But when the sequel launched in 2022, it was almost entirely overlooked. Not that it was bad, it's actually an improvement on the original, but I think the 10-year gap between releases and the out-of-nowhere nature of the release ultimately led to the sequel selling far fewer copies. You really see where the developers took fan feedback to heart, though, with the second game. The cutscene length is dramatically reduced, the story flows more naturally and takes itself a bit less seriously, and the core cast feel more distinct and fun to play as. The levels are more varied, the music is way better than the first game, and it's pretty much an all-around improvement. Sometimes just being better isn't enough to find success, though, and this game is a perfect example of that. Still, it's absolutely worth checking out if you're a fan of Sonic-inspired platform games. And number 3 is Folklore, the unusual PS3 exclusive. Kind of hard to pin down, but it's one of the more intriguing games released during the early years of that console's life. It's an action RPG where you capture mythological creatures and use them in battle. Each monster is tied to a face button, and each one has their own attack function. So it's kind of one of the first games to do the whole summons as attacks gameplay that you see in like Black Myth Wukong. Instead of just being something additive, the monster summons are how you attack in this game, and you're constantly getting introduced to new creatures that can be captured and used to assist you in combat. Sounds a bit like Pokemon, but it's not a lot like Pokemon. Trust me. You got 2 different characters to play as who have their own stories to follow, 2 different major gameplay segments. There are parts where you wander around the small Irish village of Doolin and parts where you venture into the Netherworld. No one element of the game really stands out, at least with gameplay. It's engaging enough, but not especially deep or mechanically satisfying. What makes the game good is the unique mechanics mixed with the ethereal atmosphere. The game is as steeped in folklore and mythology as you can imagine. It uses all that stuff to build a really unique mood. It's just not like anything else out there, ultimately. Some might feel that it's slow-paced, even boring, but once you get into the game's rhythm, there's something really engaging about it. And number 2 is Otogi 1 and 2. Before Demon's Souls, From Software was a studio putting out varied and eclectic games. Not all of them were necessarily good, but these 2 were Xbox original standouts. They're triple threats, they're Xbox exclusives, they're Japanese developed, and they're very weird action games that don't easily slot into usual action game archetypes. They're not Devil May Cry clones. They're more aerial-based and open and let you move around these expansive environments really quickly. They're some of the best games exclusive to Xbox, too, but nobody really played them back in the day. I don't really blame anyone for passing up on them at the time outside the most hardcore old-school FromSoft fans. But these games deserve more recognition because they're really good action games. Good luck getting them, though. A loose copy of Otogi 2 can run over $70. At least the first game generally goes for around $30, but still, that's a lot for an OG Xbox game. If you're going to play either of them, the sequel is probably the one to get because it's a pretty straightforward improvement over the first game in every way. But more people need to know about both of them in general. Everybody talks about King's Field, but nobody ever really talks about Otogi. Play these games. If you're a hardcore collector, at least consider it. They're good.
These wandering spirits are known as ghouls. They have haunted the capital for far too long. We must rid this area of the ghouls that have appeared.
And finally, at number 1, honestly, the granddaddy of flops that you gotta play somehow. I hope Sega eventually recognizes they've been sitting on gold and remakes it, but let me get into it. It's an all-time great Saturn RPG. It needs to be played by everybody, but it's $712 loose. It's one of the rarest games of all time. And I mean, there's a couple of things that keep it from being like on the Mount Rushmore of RPGs. That doesn't mean it's not one of the most unique takes on the JRPG genre ever. It is. There's nothing else quite like it. It's bizarre. It combines on-rail shooting with the traditional RPG, and it works like really, really well. It's got impeccable atmosphere, even with its, by modern standards, very rudimentary graphics. It does an excellent job transporting you into a desolate alien fantasy world. The combat system is a brilliant take on turn-based combat that I wish some other game would copy, and the story is surprisingly well told. It's a great game, but there was no way in hell it was going to compete with Final Fantasy VII, like how Sega wanted. Like, there was no way that was ever going to happen. Not in a million years. It also launched super late in the Saturn life cycle, so it got a really small print run in English-speaking countries. The actual number is disputed, but the total print run in the US could have been around 20,000 copies total. It's possible the number's even lower. There are some that speculate only 5,000 copies were ever put up for sale in our country. That's a crazy low number, given how common this is on the resale market, so it's likely there's more than than that, but there doesn't seem to be any definitive numbers out there. Regardless of the sales, it's a JRPG that enthusiasts need to play, even if only for posterity. It's one of Sega's most ambitious games, and it did not pay off in sales, but it's one of their most creative and fascinating games. There's nothing else like it. It's super cool. It's sad that it's not gotten some kind of remake or remaster, because in my opinion, a correctly marketed one with the sort of game lost to time type marketing could possibly do really well today. Anyway, what do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. Join the 1% Club below to get the Falcon Show exclusively every weekend. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.